Hello guys, welcome back to my channel Learnology. I'm back again with yet another video on soft skills. So next video, and that is in continuation with the second one. That means the key attribute of soft skill, communication skills. So we'll be talking about communication skill in detail today, and the three topics that I'm going to cover today will be nature of communication skill, process of communication skill, and barriers of communication skill. I don't want to get into long videos, rather short videos with more concept. So I hope you all will stay tuned till the end and try to get into the deeper concept of this whole soft skills and personality development series. Okay, so let me start with nature of communication skill. Today I'll be explaining through a PPT, but just a small intro of nature of communication skill. It is simply exchange of ideas, information, transaction of message, but along with that it holds certain attitude, certain perceptions, and this attitude and perceptions leads to the effective communication that I'll be talking about or explaining in later videos. So the aim is to learn effective communication, but by understanding the whole process of communication. Then we'll be talking about the process of communication in detail. What are the elements involved in the process of communication, and then the barriers of communication. That means the obstacles that can come, and generally we do not notice them, or we do not focus on those obstacles, but those play a lot of role in making your communication ineffective. So how to first we need to understand the barriers or the obstacles or the types of them, and then we'll be discussing about some of the ways to overcome them. So let me share a PPT with all of you, and now we'll talk about communication process in detail. Okay, so now what is communication? In Latin language, communicate means to impart, to share, to convey, to exchange, and the whole communication lies between these words only. So, transactional process, a process in which the transaction of messages take place, along with perceptions and emotions and experiences, because these are the attitudes which you cannot ignore, that the sender holds and the receiver also create when they receive the message. So it means that a few parties are involved. I mean, at least two parties are definitely involved with more than one person. So the sender initiates the process, and when the message reaches to the another person, it creates an impression. So it is a simple process of getting information known by person to the attention of the other person who receives the information. So this is the whole process of communication, or rather you can say the nature of communication. Now the process of communication broadly has basic three elements, but there are mid elements as well, which we'll be talking about. So the most important is sender and the receiver, because the whole exchange of communication takes place between the two. Now, who is the sender? The sender or the communicator generates the message, a person who initiates the whole conversation, and the receiver receives it. So it conveys the message to the receiver. That is what is called the sender. The whole conversation, the whole communication starts with the sender. Talking about the middle, the second element is the message. That means the whole content. That could be anything. It could be any information, or it could be a message. It could be influenced by emotional feeling. It could be any knowledgeable material. So it is called the message. It could be any fact, and that message is received by the receiver, sent by the sender. So the next or the third element is encoding. Now when the message is sent or conveyed to the receiver, it is encoded first before sending. So what is encoding the message? That means the way in which you are sending. It could be either in the form of words, in the form of pictures, in the form of gestures, many more. That in detail you will know when we'll discuss types of communication. The fourth is media, the channel through which you are sending your message. Now, that media could be face to face, it could be through email, it could be through telephone, it could be fax or by post, it could be through chats. So, that is the medium, the channel through which you're sending your message. Then is decoding. The fifth element is decoding. Decoding means the process of converting the whole message that is received by the receiver. So before receiving the message, it is decoded and then the receiver receives it. When the receiver receives it, there is another thing that happens. Again, a perception or an attitude is, created, or it gets generated inside the receiver. So that is something which we have to understand, because if it is not received in proper perception or proper attitude is not doesn't get generated, then the whole conversation or the whole communication may fail. And if it is received with proper purpose of communication, it satisfies the purpose of communication, then we call it a successful communication. So next element is feedback. Now, when the receiver receives it, it becomes a conversation or a communication when there is a when the message is reciprocated, when the whole communication, when the whole message is reciprocated or understood. If it is understood, if it is reciprocated, we consider it to be complete process. And another element which may come in between these is noise. So noise is a kind of obstruction. So this is one of the element which can create obstruction. What kind of obstruction? That we'll be talking about when we talk about barriers of communication, which will be our next topic. Before that, I want to show you this image takes place. So there is a sender who initiates the process, encodes the message, um, and there is a channel, I mean a medium through which the message is sent. Then there is a receiver, and the receiver receives it, and then the decoding. Now we'll talk about barriers of communication. That means the obstacle. What does the word barrier mean? It means the problems that come up while you are communicating. It's the obstacle that's created during your communication process. So when we are communicating, there is encoding and decoding of message, and this is something that happens through a channel. Now, when this channel, through the when in this channel there are some problems or some obstacles arises, then it can create hindrance in proper communication. There could be problem, and the whole conversation can fail. Now let's talk about the barriers of communication. So how many types of barriers of communication are there? There are four kinds of barriers of communication. That means four obstacles that can arise, four types of obstacles that can arise while communicating. So one is physical or environmental barriers. The second one is semantic or linguistic barriers. The third one is psychological, and the fourth one is socio-cultural barriers. Let's take up all of them one by one. So we'll talk about environmental barriers first. As the name suggests, physical or environmental. That means the involvement here is of the environment or the machine. So the number one element that could cause these obstacles is noise. Now, if you are communicating at a place where there is a lot of traffic, or maybe you're communicating at a place where there is a lot of noise around, or a machine that's running inside, if you're inside a factory or nearby a factory. So these are physical barriers that can create noise, traffic noise. So if these noise are too loud, then it can be one of the barriers while you are communicating. Time and distance is another one. If we are communicating at a long distance from a long distance person, maybe if you're communicating with somebody who is in another country, then time zone could be different. That is another problem. So we have to think about these time zones or these barriers before we start communicating. Defects in communication system, that could be another. I mean, you're talking and the network suddenly goes off while you're chatting, or while you're sending an email, or microphone may not work properly, There could be excess rain that may, wi-fi may go down. There could be some natural calamity. There could be sudden electrical shutdown. So these are the communication system defects. Then so you have to consider this also, that you have to select the correct medium. High temperature and humidity, that means environmental factors, and too cold, too hot, and other, I mean, other physical factors could involve your bad hearing, the other person stammering. These are some of the physical barriers involved in communication. Next is language or semantic. Semantic means your linguistic barriers. That means the barriers that arise through language. Now, if the barriers arise through language, the foremost thing that could be is the difference in the way we speak. That means the language difference. If we are talking to a person who is a native English speaker and I'm not, then maybe my pronunciation and that person's pronunciation may not match, and we may not understand each other. Another thing is your understanding over the language. Sometimes we don't, few people are not very good in English, or very not very good in vocabs, and they may not understand the meaning of each word. So the language problem could arise out of your understanding of the language. Next is homophones. I don't know if you have heard the word homophones or not, but if you haven't heard, for your knowledge, homophones are those words which has same pronunciation but different meaning. So those who do not have, command over the language or good understanding over the language may misunderstand, these words, like accept and accept, fair and fair, principle and principle. So these are few of the examples. Jargons are the words that's used in, at workplace a lot. That's understandable language at workplace, but maybe few people are not aware of those jargons, or the freshers, sometimes they join, they are not aware of those jargons. So then there could be, a gap of communication, or there could be a problem in communication or understanding. And these could So these may arise, this, linguistic barriers. The third one is psychological barriers. Now, psychological barriers comes out of your psychology, or the way you think, your thought process, the stress. If you are under stress, then that could again be a barrier in communication. Let's talk about the elements. Ego. Ego, I mean, your attitude. That means if you have a ego problem, if you have an attitude problem in your mind, then it could, create, or it could lead into a conflict between the communicators, and it could lead into a bad relationships. Prejudice, that means the bias nature of the community, based on, caste, religion, or it could be based upon anything. Maybe if you think you are superior than other person. So or bias maybe in the terms that, okay, I know more than the other person. Emotions and feelings, again, if you are emotionally down, that could again be a hindrance. Self image, sometimes we are too much possessive about our self image, positive or negative image. If your image is not good, is not a positive one, side, then it could again, create a whole wrong perception of your message. Filtering of messages, sometimes we filter too much, sometimes we filter the message in a way that correct message is not conveyed. Again, with closed mind, if you're sending the message or communicating, or even the receiving. Your status, sometimes we are too much, too much possessive about, too much we think about our status, and in that way, if you're communicating, and if that your status is on your mind, it's playing on your mind, then again that could be another problem. Perceptions, as I have already discussed. Your attitudes, your interest, if you're not interested in that communication, again it could be one of the hindrance. Daydreaming, if you are already dreaming about something else, and you're not mentally present there, or in the conversation, then again that could be a barrier in effective communication. The last one is socio-culture barriers, because every country, or every, place, or every background, from your religion, or background of your religion, or background of the place you belong to, has different kinds of, culture. and we are very much bound to our culture. So that is also another kind of barrier that may arise, like concept of time. We in Asia, we take the time very leisurely, but that's not the case in Western countries. That's not the case. There the people are too much, too much punctual. They are very um, for them time is very very important. Then social or I mean the assumptions about caste system, that is also there in the mind of people. So that could be another problem. Sometimes we think our culture to be superior or inferior. Then mannerism, few people don't follow the etiquettes or the manners. That's also confusing. Sometimes your dressing sense sometimes is not up to the mark, or it's not according to the environment, it's not according to the place you are in. That could again create some misconcept or misunderstandings. Your body language plays very important role. Body language is a part of soft skills that should be very very effective. So in detail I'll be talking about body language, but yes, it is one of the barriers if not handled properly. So good behavior, your ethical principles, sometimes your ethics is not something the other person believes in, then that could, and you are very you are very strict about your ethical principles, then that could again create the barriers. So these are some of the most important types of barriers that we must understand that could create obstacles in your communication. Overcoming them is yet another important aspect of it, but aware of them, then up to certain extent we can focus on overcoming them. So let's talk about how to overcome physical barriers. Physical barriers, you should keep in mind the time. So if you're talking, if you're setting up a call, or if you're talking to somebody who is in other country where the time zone is different, we should take care of these things. We should see that we talk or communicate at a place where there is less noise, so there is no obstructions in the communication. Language barrier, again we have to get command over the language. So English is one of the most accepted language all over the world. So we should improve our vocabulary. We should try to master the language, not master, at least to at least be intermediate in the language. So listening skill, we should improve the listening skill, so that when we listen to other persons speaking, we should be able to understand them correctly. Then comes the psychological barriers, the most important and the most difficult one as well. It's very important to ignore, to overcome the psychological barriers, because it's totally depends upon your mindset. We should always have an open mind before you receive you read any message, or you receive any message. So we should be ready to accept the faults and limitations of our own, and we should always be ready to think from other person's perspective without making a mindset already. So it's totally about your psychology. It's totally about how you take up things, your problem solving skill. Again, lots of soft skill attributes are involved here. So you have to learn the soft skills attributes, you have to acquire them to overcome the psychological barriers. That is a little difficult, but that is what the whole series is all about. Socio-cultural barriers is something that you can overcome by having an open mind. Also, we should be observant. You observe what the other kind of person is from a different background, what culture that person might be liking or following, the clothing style, so these are essential things to learn if you go abroad or to other country, or maybe to a different place, different city. You should be observant, you should learn the etiquettes, the manner of their eating style, so that these things doesn't become a barrier. So yes, these are some of the important points that you must know about communication and keep in mind before communicating, so that the whole communication becomes effective. Try to overcome the physical barriers, try to have control over your language, your perception, and your understanding or observing the people. So thank you so much guys, that's all from my side in this video. I'll be coming up with lots more in my next video. Stay tuned, please watch till end, and please like, share, and do subscribe. Thank you so much, and bye bye for